Hey guys, and welcome to Film Artsy, your #1 source for all things films and movies, and Birds of Prey is finally here, and people are super excited about this movie. But one thing that's really interesting is how this movie is now being received, with its mostly positive reviews that are being posted online, and with this movie now seeing a mass release to the public. We wanted to talk about not only how this movie is being perceived by critics across the board, and then fans across the board, but also what this could mean for the future of the DCEU. So that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at how this movie, Birds of Prey, holds up not only on its own, but also comparatively to the rest of the DCEU. Now, at the time of recording this video, the critics have already had a chance to view the movie, and a very small audience has been able to see the movie as well. And right now on Rotten Tomatoes, this movie is sitting at an 86% from both critics and viewers alike. Now, that's actually pretty interesting to see a score so similar between what critics say and what the casual audience says. Usually there's about a 10% differential whenever looking at Rotten Tomatoes scores for movies that have big cult followings like this one. Now, looking at the main perspective that's being presented about this movie mostly surrounds the fact that this movie is eyeing to do something quite different and reinvent the character, which we can kind of understand that concept from the whole emancipation title, subtitle, or whatever you want to call that. But it is an attempt to reinvent the character, and they really focused on having an all-female cast, and there's been a lot of praise on just the way that this cast performed in this movie. And the fact that this movie got the R rating that they probably planned on early on was really able to give the team making this film a lot more room and space to develop something that had a lot more freedom to just explore different plot lines and different types of developments along the way. Now, there are some critics on the other side of things pointing out some of the flaws where maybe the plot wasn't as strong, or it just seemed like this character was put into a plot line that didn't seem to do anything too unique. And while we mostly disagree with some of these critics' points, it's still worth noting that the criticisms are still there for this movie as well, as with most likely any movie. But if you look at the grand scheme of the DCEU and compare how this movie is so far perceived against the other films in the DCEU, it is really interesting to look at. We can see that Wonder Woman still has the #1 spot with a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, followed by 2019's Shazam, and then there's Birds of Prey sitting right there at third place with its score of 86%, which is still well above where Aquaman is, and it doesn't seem too likely that we'll see Birds of Prey pass up either Shazam or drop down below Aquaman. Then, of course, we have the other movies that didn't perform as well, such as Man of Steel, Justice League, Batman v Superman, Suicide Squad. And what's really interesting, though, is Suicide Squad still sits at the bottom at a 27%, and that's where this character was initially introduced for a lot of people, and obviously for the DCEU. So it is really interesting to see how they were able to pivot and turn this whole thing around with this character. Now, mind you, this list does not include the score for the Joker movie that came out late last year, as it's not part of the DCEU, and that movie was actually a huge success. It ended up being one of the biggest movies of last year. But also, interestingly enough, if we look at the score, the critics only gave it a 68% and the audience gave it an 88%, and this is a good movie to compare it to, as they're both R-rated DC movies. Now, of course, there is probably a lot more controversy surrounding the Joker movie, where this other movie is a little bit more intentionally lighthearted. It tries to be a little bit more fun, follows a lot of the comedic tropes that we see in movies like Deadpool, so it is kind of hard to compare, of course, across the board, but it is still worth noting nonetheless. But this is a really great sign, because we've been talking on this channel for a long time about the future of the DCEU and how them focusing more on individual stories rather than trying to throw a team together just based off of characters that they have the intellectual properties to. The DCEU could perform better, and we really were optimistic that this new movie universe and the new direction they have could potentially grow and continue to make better movies, and that's a win for everyone across the board. But we did want to go ahead and turn this conversation around to all of you. What are you guys thinking about this movie? Have you seen the movie just yet? If you have seen the movie, let us know what you thought about it in the comments down below. Try to avoid spoilers if possible. And if you haven't seen the movie yet, come back after you've watched it. Leave a review in the comments down below. That would be really awesome. Also, make sure you guys are subscribed with notifications on for more videos just like this, where we break down new movies, we talk about all the comic book movies that come out and whatnot. So make sure you guys are subscribed with notifications on, and we'll see you guys all next time with a brand new video. Bye, guys.
Talking?
I'm about to.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
Hi.
See you guys.
Know anybody?